Hello everybody, welcome to that channel and this video tutorial. I would like to talk in that one about something really interesting, at least for me, by myself, because some asking me why you want to paint 75mm instead of 35mm. Why you want to paint miniatures that you want to use to play. All that questions came from a lot of people, and why you decide to paint miniatures just for yourself, just to enjoy painting. What's the reason? I would like to ask you, and I would like to know your feedback about that. The differences between 75mm and 32mm or 28mm, if we talk about the old scale from Games Workshop, for example, that now it's a bit bigger, so it's like 30mm, something like that. What's the difference between 75 and 30mm? The main part about that could came to your minds like, okay, painting a miniature bigger will be easier, right? But if you want to paint something smaller, it's harder. You have to buy smaller brushes like 000 or something like that. So it's something really difficult. So why you have the option to paint miniatures in the easiest way? Let me tell you that painting 75mm at the beginning could look easy, but later maybe it's not so easy. Sometimes you have to use airbrush or bigger brushes, because if you want to paint everything with really small brush, maybe you will see the brush strokes everywhere. And in the other way, if you are painting 30mm, maybe at the beginning you want to paint with airbrush, and then you discover that you have to use more time your brush. So what's the reason, or what is the answer to paint in the best way or the easiest way both projects, something bigger or something smaller? The truth, every model should came with, we can say, similar contrast, but with less or more layers. But the contrast always will be the same. I'm hearing a lot of people talking about, okay, 35mm or 30mm, you have to paint with higher contrast because you need to paint with bigger and bigger muscles, and everything should be more and more and more. And when you paint 75, you have the option to paint with less contrast. More or less is true, but at the same time, if you are painting with less contrast, you have to define with other techniques or other ways. Why you should paint a 75mm if it's not a miniature to play? So what's the reason to paint miniatures that you won't use them for any reason? So just the main reason to paint them is just enjoy painting. What kind of people will enjoy painting? It's the hardest moment in our miniature world. So the truth is, enjoy painting, it's the truth. So I enjoy a lot of time painting miniatures. So that one is my job. So I was painting a lot of years as hobby, and now as professional, like 15 years painting as professional. So this is the truth why I started enjoying more and more time just in painting, not painting for playing. So if your idea is painting for playing, maybe you have to paint quicker because you have to paint big armies or more models at the end, and you need to paint, I don't know, in few months or months, maybe less than months, maybe just in a single month you have to paint a huge army and you don't have enough time. But if your idea is painting just for fun, you will discover that you have a really huge world, because you have bigger miniatures from a lot of companies and then smaller miniatures from a lot of companies at the same time. So if you want to paint just to play, maybe you have to use the miniatures for that company, and maybe you don't like that company. For example, if we are talking about orcs, maybe you don't like the orcs for that company and you like other orcs. Maybe playing with friends could be okay. But if it's only painting for fun, you can buy every orc that you can imagine, for big scales, small scales, everywhere. So let me explain you that painting it's really, really fun once time you understand some tricks. And let me explain you some of them in that tutorial. What do you want to get painting something bigger? For example, 75mm instead of 30mm. The first one is that at the beginning you can paint completely random, like with brush strokes, with airbrush. You can paint crazy stuff with crazy colors and then move them for something new, something weird at the beginning, and later will be so easy and interesting. So what can offer you painting something bigger? Because it's like on a canvas. So you have a big surface to paint completely random with everything that you can imagine. If you have to paint 30mm, for example, talking about goblins, it's smaller than 35mm or 30, maybe it's just 25mm. So if you have to paint something like that, I can remember when I was painting a snotling just 10 millimeters. That one was so small, so fun model, but really small. So how I have to paint that model? Only technically. I can't offer something really artistic because it's really small. So once time you understand that something smaller it's technically and something bigger is more artistic, you will see why I prefer painting 75 millimeters. It's true that our miniature world comes with a lot of ideas. For example, painting, playing, just reading the lore. So you have a bunch of ideas to enjoy with that. For example, making lists with the top miniatures for that competition or something like that. So everyone have their own unique space or room in our miniature. So this is why I like to explain why I enjoy painting, because some people now can't understand why I like painting, because the reason is just paint, just for fun. Let me say that painting 75 millimeters will give me the perfect canvas to represent everything that I have on my mind. For example, if I like to play with OSL, magic lightings, or different environments, playing with cold colors, warm colors, or everything on my mind, I have the possibility to add it, because when I have a big surfaces, for example, if I split the model just, for example, like a bust, I have the option to add on the skin a lot of ideas, just painting with similar skin tones that you can imagine, or something weird, for example, adding greens, violets, magentas, other kind of colors. If I have to translate that for 35 or 30 millimeters or 28, will be harder because I don't have enough room to work on that. So I have to keep more attention on technical part than all that environment or all that ideas. This is why for me it's much more interesting painting 75 millimeters than 30 millimeters. But it's true that in the same way I enjoy painting 30 millimeters. Why? Because technically it's really interesting. Once time you paint the technical part, you will see how then you can add everything from arts really quick and really easy. So if you want to do something like a sketch to learn, maybe I'm going to recommend you do it in 30 millimeters than in 75, just because you will need invest more time. But at the same time, you can't get exactly the same results with 75 millimeters than in 30. At least at the beginning, because later, if you see my miniatures, I can add everything that I can imagine, for sure, always with my human eyes and my human hands and my brushes, for sure. I'm not painting with 000 or something like that. But it's really interesting to know that everything that you can imagine, you can do or replicate on 30 millimeters or 75. Just on 75, you will have a bigger canvas to add everything that you can imagine. If you want to do freehands, maybe on a 75 will be easier than in a 30 millimeters, just because the size is so small. This is another reason why I love painting miniatures bigger. So just to say a conclusion, when you want to paint 30 millimeters, I recommend you paint the technical part at the beginning. If you have to paint 75, maybe you can skip that area or that step for something later. But when you have something for games, at the beginning, define everything, the face, the muscles, the weapons, the skin, everything, define it with edge highlighting and outlinings. Once time you have that, you will see like then adding layerings, it's so easy, because you will see easier where you have to increase the contrast, where you have to add something else. Why I explain that? Because a lot of painters came to me for my coaching, for my Patreon, for my tutorials, asking me how I have to improve my non-metallic metals. And the truth is, they can understand the basic, the outlinings. So that dark linings that you paint, you have to paint everywhere. That's the main part for a 30 millimeters. And you have to paint them. Once time you have painted, you can add non-metallic metals, OSLs, and everything. But trying to paint 30 millimeters with the edge highlighting and the outlinings, it's impossible. So keep attention on that, because painting non-metallic metal for me comes from art instead of for the miniature world, because you have to represent the magic lighting, the magic lights, or the bright, higher contrast that you have to do to represent that surfaces, that metallic, that material, instead of just thinking about how to define that miniature. That's the trick. And then when you have 75 millimeters, you have to keep more attention on the gradient. because if you don't have a big gradient or really nice gradient, for sure you can do it with your airbrush, for sure, but maybe at the end, if you don't paint with your brush, you will see like you need something else. And this is the typical problem or issues that I found in 75mm. I'm seeing a lot of miniatures really great about blending because just was made it with the airbrush and nothing else. And you can see nice, but then when they paint with the brush, you can see that they need something else. So how to fix that? Adding more information, different gradients, different shades, or just adding freehands, or trying to add more contrast with your brush, and then trying to blend with your airbrush, with different colors, or exactly the same color. The idea that I would like to transmit for you is when you are painting 75mm, you have a really huge canvas. Maybe for you it's something small and much, it's bigger than 35mm or 30mm, but in my mind it's so big. So you have the option to add a lot of layerings to get really interesting gradients, freehands, OSLs, non-metallic metals, playing with different environments, playing with temperatures, playing with glossy results, matte results. You have a bunch of possibilities on a 75mm. This is why, in my opinion, if you are a painter, 75 will be really nice scale for you. But it's true that if the orcs that you want to paint, or the humans, or the females, or everything that you want to paint just came from a board game, just use that miniatures. But remember, if you want to paint 30mm, try to keep more attention on the technical part. And then, if you want to paint 75mm, try to do something more artistic, because the technical part will come so easy for the scale. At the same time, always you have to paint the outlinings and the edge highlighting. Keep that on mind, because will be, I think, the key of everything. After listening to me, all that speech, I would like to know which one is your favorite scale, if it's 30mm, 75, or other kind of scales. For example, painting bust. Let me know what do you want to see in the future with the comments, and I would like to do more tutorials about that one. Again, thank you very much to watch that tutorial, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.